Well, new video evidence has emerged showing what our next guest believes is irrefutable evidence that Charlie Kirk was not shot from the front, but from the back. Jason Goodman from Crowdsource The Truth says Charlie Kirk was shot from behind using a low muzzle velocity projectile. He's willing to debate anyone, by the way, who thinks that he's wrong. So we are an open platform here at Redacted. We welcome all ideas and conversation. And we wanted to have Jason on the show so he could show us his evidence and have a dialogue with him. Jason, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Clayton. Good to see you again.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Okay, so again, maybe we go back to the, for people who are just new to this story, I guess, like what is the official story? And then what does your evidence, you say, show us?
Of course, the official story is that Tyler Robinson fired a high-powered rifle, 30-06 round, a supersonic rifle round that has a tremendous amount of kinetic energy. Everybody who is an expert in ballistics and hunting, which I am not, but all of the experts that I observe say this type of round would make a huge blowout, even in a much larger animal than a human. You shoot a deer in the neck. People have tested it on cow thighs and things like that. And there should have been a tremendous blowout in the exit wound. And so people have presumed that the small hole that we see in the front of Charlie Kirk's neck, that he bleeds out of in a very disturbing way in a lot of the videos that people have seen, that is an entry wound, because entry wounds from rifle rounds are small, exit wounds are large. And of course, we have a lot of people who have audio waveform analysis, acoustic triangulation, that they can do these so-called crack thump calculations where they're measuring the differential between the explosive charge that launches the projectile out of the gun and the sound of the bullet actually breaking the sound barrier. I'm also not a math expert. I can't directly challenge the calculations that experts make in that. I just don't do the math. But it's important to remember, Clayton, that whoever it is that did this, they have a lot of information about the public. In 1963, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, we can debate on another day whether Abraham Zapruder was there by chance or planted there by the FBI. A lot of people have different opinions on that. But there was basically one guy that we know of in the crowd running silent film, 16 millimeter, 8 millimeter, whatever it was, even if there's 3 or 4 films. We don't have multiple high resolution audio recordings. People didn't have access to digital waveform analysis. All of these things are available today. So we saw a similar occurrence in Butler, Pennsylvania, in that there was an assassination attempt involving a high-powered rifle. And I believe it was Mike Adams, the health ranger. He was the first guy I saw. I didn't know anything about this type of crack thump triangulation analysis, but he did a very comprehensive video. And certainly now, most people know that that can be done. And if this is a complex conspiracy, we should anticipate that the conspirators would anticipate that public investigations would include this type of analysis, and they would want to bake into the cake, as it were, some method of fooling people who would do this analysis. And what I'm about to show you guys explains how that happened, explains why the shot did not come from the front. And I was just watching earlier today, Dr. Chris Martenson has a new video out where he's explaining more about what he thinks happened. He does rely in some of his research on the crack thump triangulation calculations, but he had a question that he couldn't answer that I'm going to answer for you, Clayton, and Natalie, and all of your viewers here today.
All right. And, I should point out, yesterday, Rob O'Neill, the man who killed Osama bin Laden, is on the record now saying that right from the very beginning, none of it made sense to him. And he's shot people in the face. He's like, this story is not making... Anyway, I've never shot anyone in the face. So Rob O'Neill has a vast experience doing that. He knows all too well what that looks like. Okay, so let's walk through what you have here and what you say is irrefutable evidence that the shot did not come from the front.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm not saying that I know more than people who have that type of firsthand experience. I don't need to have firsthand experience shooting people or studying ballistics to just observe all of the professionals who do have that experience. Rob O'Neill, Chris Martenson, Zeb Boykin, all these other, Range Day, Bro, all of these guys who do have a lot of experience. I see the experts disagree, and that causes me to believe that we're looking at something novel. So let me show you this. This is the video that I am relying upon, and this is a composite image that I created in Adobe Photoshop. Now, to be clear, I didn't create any of these dots. These are all derived from original video frames from two different versions of the same video. Zeb Boykin is a U.S. Marine and now a citizen journalist, a YouTuber, a podcaster. And he came to my attention very early in this investigation. He was doing ballistic analysis and he went viral. And I saw him on Owen Schroyer's show, and Owen and I had the same immediate reaction to seeing this video. It was substantially higher quality than really almost any of the other videos that we've seen. Even in Chris Martenson's evaluation, he says some of these videos look like they were shot on a potato. This one exhibits characteristics that cause me to believe that it came from the original videographer from their phone. And by that, I mean it was full resolution, 1920 by 1080 HD. It seemed very high bit rate. It doesn't have a lot of blockiness or smeariness. It looked like a very good video. Now, when I contacted Zeb, I asked him to send me the video, and he did. And I began to interrogate it in some of the tools that I use, and there were some strange things that I observed about it. First of all,
now we should point out, Jason, if our audience is new to you, your background is that you do this for a living. When you worked in Hollywood, frankly, you worked on major motion pictures in the visual effects department. So you know this stuff. I think you said you started using Photoshop when you were like in diapers, basically, right?
13 years old, yes. First version of Photoshop that I used was 1.07, and I think it was 1985, 6, something like that. But I've been doing digital imaging for a long, long time. And so that's exactly where my expertise lies. And again, experts, whether they're neurosurgeons, ballistic experts, or whatever, they're looking at all of this through the lens of distorted digital imagery. So the first step in this evaluation is we need to understand these digital videos and the digital images that we're looking at. So Zeb sent me this video, and the first thing I noticed was that it did not open in QuickTime Player on my Mac when I double-clicked on it, just like a movie from your phone would. And so I started to examine it, and I first thought that it was an MPEG transport stream, but upon further interrogation, I've been continuing my investigation since we spoke, I've discovered that it wasn't that. It's an MPEG stream that's encoded in what's called high 10, which is a subset of the H.264 protocol. This is not a format that the iPhone creates. The iPhone is capable of making high dynamic range videos, but not in this high 10 format. The other thing that I noticed about it is that it's encoded at 20 frames per second. We can see right here, it's got a pretty high bit rate, but it's 20 frames per second. And I realize this gets pretty technical, but it's important.
Right. Well, most films, when people see films in a theater, it's usually at 24 frames a second. A lot of phones, you can set it to 30 frames a second or 60 frames a second. 20, though, is odd to me.
You're exactly right. The 24 frame per second frame rate is the cinema frame rate of a movie camera. And so digital cameras that want to mimic cinema cameras can shoot at 24. European television standards are 25. North American television standards are 30. High definition can be 60, but 20 is very unusual. And again, it's a format that the iPhone cannot create. This high 10 MPEG profile. It's not something that any Android phone, it's not something that any iPhone or action camera or, consumer, prosumer camera can create. So I began to investigate this 20 frame per second file, and I found these two dots in the video, and I've highlighted them here in this image. People can see we've got this dot right here. These three dots create a line. And when I started talking to Zeb Boykin about this 20 frame per second video, days later, someone sent him the same video, but at 30 frames per second. Now, this is where it becomes very important. I was looking at these videos, and in order to get a 20 frame per second video from a 30 frame per second original, there's a couple of things that you could do. The most obvious would be to sort of slow it down, but then you'd play it back and you'd notice that the sound is slow, the motion is slow. There'd be certain obvious things that you could see, and these videos did not exhibit those things. Another way you could do it is you could just drop 10 frames every second, but then you'd get this sort of jerky, juddery motion that also wouldn't look natural, and I did not observe that. The other thing you could do is a complex process called optical flow, but that also creates artifacts, and I didn't observe any of that. So when I was looking at the 30 frame per second video, that's where I found this third dot right here behind Charlie's head. Now, I want to be very careful to not show anything that's going to get us dinged on any of the platforms, but I'm going to switch to Adobe After Effects here, and I want to show people what I'm talking about in the difference between the 20 frame per second and the 30 frame per second video. So here we see the projectile right here. This is the second dot that I just showed everybody, and it's headed towards Charlie. Now, my allegation is that this originates in a video that was shot at 240 frames per second. In the 20 frame video, you see when I advance forward, can you guys see that very acute disturbance of his shirt? It almost looks like an invisible hand is pinching the collar and pulling it up. Can you guys see that?
Yeah. It looks like someone's pinching it. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I allege is happening right there is that this is a low muzzle velocity projectile, very likely a bullet fired from an air rifle or an air pistol traveling at 500 feet per second. And I arrive at that 500 feet per second number because I've applied this scale. Now, it would be a complex mathematical problem to actually measure the distance between these dots, but if we begin with the hypothesis that this video was shot at 240 frames per second, that gives us an original that is evenly divisible by 20 and by 30. If we divide a 240 frame video by 12 and use 1 out of every 12 frames, we get an even, smooth 20 frames per second. If we take that same 240 frame per second video and divide by 8, we get an even, smooth 30 frames per second. But we're using 1 out of every 8 or 1 out of every 12, and that results in a different set of frames being used to make up each video. That's how I got this third dot. But we certainly know, even with my simple mathematical skills, that 3 dots make a line. And this is a line traveling directly toward Charlie's head. The next frame of the video, he's been hit, and it comes out the front of his neck, and it catches on the shirt collar. It's lost so much of its kinetic energy traveling through his body that when it hits the shirt collar, it pulls and stretches the shirt quite dramatically. I'm going to switch right now to the 30 frame video. So here we have different frames from the 30 frame video, and we see there is the third frame of the projectile. It hits him, and we see that disruption. Now this is recompressed. You can see it's much lower quality, lower bit rate than the 20 frame video. And
Right.
so now you see a different kind of disruption of the shirt. I think what's happening is this projectile is sort of moving around inside his shirt. It's been caught by the shirt like a net. And now the shirt, when the fabric relaxes, it goes back down the shirt, and it's kind of, falling out the bottom of his shirt as he's shot. And then in the next frames, we see this exit wound. out the front of his neck. Remember, people, the experts are disagreeing. Is this an entry wound or an exit wound? Well, an exit wound from a supersonic rifle round, which has a tremendous amount of kinetic energy, would create a big explosive blowout and a lot of material. So if he was shot from the front, it's pretty implausible by most experts' estimation that his spine could stop a bullet. Now, a lot of people say, oh, bullets do strange things when they enter the body. And again, I don't have the expertise to personally evaluate that. I'm taking their word for it. But what I believe is happening is this low muzzle velocity projectile is hitting him just below the base of his skull. And this is where we can answer Dr. Martin's question. It hits just below the base of his skull, where it damages his spinal cord, causing that involuntary reaction. I forget the medical term that he used, but it's severe brain trauma that he's talking about. And that happens instantly, causing Charlie's arms to go up and his fists to clench. It pops out the front of his throat, goes down the shirt, and he's immediately dead because it's ruptured his carotid artery and his jugular vein. And just to get to the speed that I've derived, so I've introduced this arbitrary scale. And it doesn't matter if these are feet, inches, meters, these are units per video frame. And what we see here is, we know that Charlie Kirk is about 6'4", and he's seated, so we're seeing about 3 feet from seat to the top of his head. And I asked ChatGPT, if a projectile were fired by a gun that could travel 500 feet per second, which is the muzzle velocity of something that I've found out about called a B&W M50. I'm told this is the most powerful air pistol available, and this thing launches projectiles at approximately 500 feet per second. So if a projectile were shot out of that gun or something very similar towards Charlie Kirk from close range, it could certainly be fatal. And ChatGPT tells me at 500 feet per second, if photographed at 240 frames per second, the projectile would move approximately 2.08 feet in 1/240th of a second. And these 3 dots are very close to equidistant. Given that Charlie, we're looking at about 3 feet of Charlie here, it looks to me like 2 to 2.5 feet between each of these. And this is the empirical evidence that this is a projectile fired at Charlie. Now, before we get questions from people are going to say to me, but wait a minute, Jason, I've looked at that 20 frame per second video, and there's a problem because it looks like this projectile is moving away from Charlie. This one appears first in the sequence, and this one appears next. So it's moving in reverse. And we can actually even look at that. We'll go back to After Effects over here for a second, and let's look at our 20 frame per second video. So we can see as we zoom out, Charlie's been hit, and here is that first position of the projectile. If I reverse the video 1 frame, there's the projectile there. As we move forward, that projectile appears to be moving back. But here's where it's important to understand video compression technology. MPEG uses interframe compression, meaning it's not just measuring pixels within the image. Here I'm sitting in a simulated room, and my hands are moving, my mouth is moving, but nothing in the background is moving. So the video compressor that's sending my video to you over the internet is not updating these pixels around here in the ceiling or in this background image of the Empire State Building there. None of that stuff is updating from frame to frame. My hands are, my mouth is. When we introduce something into a motion video, particularly one that's been transcoded and recompressed as this one has, as evidenced by that file I showed earlier with the 20 frame per second and giving us all the information about the file. This has been recompressed to a format that could not have been produced in an iPhone. What happens is, while the video is encoded, there is an algorithm that tracks moving pixels. And when it's my hand or it's a car or something moving along, it can track that very easily. But when it is a high contrast, very small item like these white dots, essentially white dots presented against dark backgrounds, the encoder can become confused, and these things can be displayed temporally out of order. And I allege that that is what's happening, that this dot, if we could get the original 240 frame file, we would see it first here, then here, then here, then it hits the back of his skull, deflects downward approximately 19 degrees, comes out his throat after destroying his spinal cord and killing him, gets caught in the shirt, goes down the front of the shirt, and that's it. Oh, sorry, one more thing before we go to questions, because people are going to say, no, Jason, acoustic analysis, we have crack thump. How did that supersonic sound get there? An air gun doesn't make supersonic sound. And I want to be clear, everything I'm saying is my opinion. Clayton and Natali don't necessarily support anything that I'm saying, and I'm not implicating this company or any other company. I'm just demonstrating these products as examples of technology that exists. There's something called Digital Trigger Technologies that sells the Digi Trigger. And this is an item that you can put into your gun. It replaces an AR-style trigger, and inside this handle, it has a digital programmable component. And again, I'm not an expert, but I've watched videos made by the inventor of this product, and he says you can program it, if you're a sniper, to pull the trigger in a certain way, I guess a light touch for a sniper. You can also program it so one pull of the trigger fires the bullets twice, or one pull of the trigger fires continuously. The developer of this product in the videos cautions people to follow the law in the state that they're in. But the point is that digital trigger allows you to program the gun to do a lot of things. Now, what I am an expert in from doing visual effects, like bullet time in the Matrix, where lots of cameras are programmed to fire sequentially in very precise timing, or in 3D cinematography, where cameras need to fire very precisely. I know if you have one digitally triggered thing, you can very precisely time two things to be simultaneously triggered. So if someone was in this tunnel behind Charlie while he was being shot, and I don't know if people have seen that video, but there was a tunnel, sort of an underpass there behind where he was seated. And if someone were standing in that tunnel with the air rifle, they could pull a digital synchronized trigger and it could simultaneously fire a supersonic rifle on the building far away. Now, I'm not saying that this person is the shooter, but here we are looking at the other side of the tunnel. This is Charlie's tent over here. He's seated right here to the left of this woman's hat. And this is the guy who removed the SD card from the camera right behind Charlie. Everybody else is running for their lives. He's up here, perched in a spot where I don't know if you could get the angle on Charlie from here with a rifle, an air rifle or an air pistol, but if you could, you'd be hidden from sight from the crowd. The sound of the air pistol would be quite hidden. And there's one final thing that I want to say. I know I'm running my mouth a lot, but a lot of people heard this research and they said, oh, Jason is saying that Charlie got shot from behind. That means he got shot by a modified camera that was shooting bullets at him. And that is not correct, because here we see the camera behind Charlie and we can see that the line from its lens doesn't line up with the trajectory of those bullets. It really doesn't line up at all. But what it does introduce is the possibility that a targeting camera could have been used. The video feed from that camera could have been fed to something like, and again, I'm not implicating the long shot company, but these guys make a bunch of Wi-Fi cameras that you put down range near your target, and then you sit with your iPad when you don't have clear visibility to the target, and you aim your gun and you shoot at the target.
It's remarkable. I mean, I have so many questions. I know our audience has so many questions. But I guess to bottom line it, you don't believe that he was shot from the front based on the video evidence that you're saying here. You've put this out there for anyone that wants to debate you. Has anyone come forward that says they want to try to refute what you found here?
No. And in fact, when I started publishing this on my X account at JG_CSTT, I put a challenge up. And this is not a bet. This is not a sweepstakes. I'm just saying, just like I would hire a freelance photographer and pay them for their photography, I'm willing to pay $100 to anyone who can refute the facts that I've just laid out. And X has started putting this content warning, saying that this is sensitive content. And now everything I post gets this sensitive content warning, and people can't see whatever it is that I'm posting. I even posted a thing saying that they've removed one of the sensitive content posts, and that got a sensitive content warning. I'm talking here about H.264 video, and that's got a sensitive content warning. So I think this information, I can't say why, but it's being suppressed. People don't want to address it. And again, anyone who wants to refute any of the measurable facts, these are empirical facts that I've just laid out. Everything I've showed you, it's an existing technology. I'm not talking about some imaginary plasma-powered ballistic drone that came out of nowhere and shot Charlie Kirk. I'm not talking about bullets ricocheting off of bulletproof vests that he obviously wasn't wearing. I've laid out a very detailed explanation of what happened. I've shown examples of technologies that could have been used, or certainly other units of the same capability could have been used. And I believe this explains everything that can't be explained, the nature of the wound, why he had that traumatic brain injury, this video being shot at 240 frames per second. Someone is going to have an image of the individual who made that video, because there is this frame in the video where we see a photographer here. This guy looks to be a news photographer to me. He looks like he's got a press pass. He doesn't look like a college student. He's got a big professional looking still camera. He's taking pictures. Again, I'm not implicating this individual in any wrongdoing. I'm just saying I expect that this person would have a very high resolution image of whoever it is that took this video that I allege was photographed at 240 frames per second and deceptively presented to us at 20 frames per second.
Jason Goodman, will you stick around for our Rumble Premium today and answer a few questions from our audience? If anyone has I see a lot of questions coming in. So if you wouldn't mind, I've got some questions. I know people on our staff have some questions, and I see the thousands of you watching right now probably have a few questions. So if you would, for a few minutes, hang out. We're just going to go over to Rumble Premium here in a moment. So just hang with us, Jason, if you'd be so kind. But first, thanks to all of you for subscribing and being a part of our show here. We really, really appreciate it. Again, we want to present all ideas to you, and you guys make the you take the information and run with it, make your own determinations on it. We still don't have, to my mind, the medical examiner's report. I know this can take up to 3 months sometimes. There's many cases where it's 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months before you get a medical examiner's report. When will we see that? So I think that will be, hopefully, if it's an honest medical examiner's report, we'll finally put to bed the answer of whether or not this was a 30-06 rifle round that hit Charlie Kirk. Hopefully we'll answer a lot of questions, I hope. So we'll be waiting on that. But thank you guys for being a part of our show. I should point out that we do have our Redacted store. If you'd like to come over and support independent media, you can do that by going to redactedstore.com. Check out our new wares that are up there right now, including all of our fall paraphernalia, everything heading into the cold winter months, new hoodies, new shirts, and our brand new hoodie that just rolled out, which is our Don't Tread on Me hoodie, which is my new favorite. I should point out they run a little small, so if you normally wear a large, like I usually wear a large, you probably want to order an extra large in the hoodie sizes. They just run a little bit small, so check those out. Redactedstore.com is the place to go to do all of that. So we are going to move over to Rumble Premium. Again, the whole show is free, but we want to support our free speech friends over at Rumble. And just going to hang out for a few minutes for anybody who's a Rumble Premium member. Come on over. The water is warm over there. Do we have how do people come over there, David? What's the URL in case people want to sign up for Rumble Premium? Anybody? Yeah, the Rumble Premium URL is Rumble.
Sorry, I didn't have it queued up.
Sorry. Just curious if you guys know the URL.
Sorry, man. I have to mute when I'm doing the switch so I can hear the stream. Yeah, so...
All right. Well, we'll figure that out. But anyway, hey, come on over to Rumble and just go to rumble.com/premium, I think is what it is. I don't know. We'll find out. If anyone knows, let me know.
Yes, that is correct. I just queued it up. It's rumble.com/premium.
Rumble.com/premium. All right. I think David had a stroke. I'm not really sure what happened there. Rumble.com/premium is the place to go. Come on over there and check us out. We're going to hang out for a few minutes with Jason and answer any questions you have. So thank you guys for watching. We'll see you back here live on Monday.